The climate that we're operating under has everyone on the defensive.
You see a person and you automatically put them in a box and say, well, this is what this person should be like.
Strangers in the coffee shop, strangers on the subway, everybody is on the defensive.
All of this ostracizing people, what are we afraid of?
We're called to love one another. It can't be, I reject you as a person.
This country's been through so much. Its people has been through so much. Why can't we fix this?
Do we have issues we have to deal with? Yes, we do. But we're not going to be able to deal with them if we're fighting and yelling at each other and not listening.
It was important for me to meet somebody who didn't have horns and a tail.
Yeah, she has an accent. Oh gosh, she dressed funny. But we're talking the same thing. We're all concerned about our children, we're concerned about the world we live in.
A lot of people wouldn't even think we should be here talking to each other, but I'm sorry, I disagree.
We are connected in probably 12 different ways I can think of right like that.
Yeah, I can give you a hug.
I think it's safe to say that 2020 has been a challenging year, historically challenging even. During a time when the impulse to band together should be greater than ever, widespread illness, political divides, and social differences have kept us apart. Good evening, I'm Christopher Ayers, host of All Things Considered on 90.5 WESA, and editor for the One Small Step initiative here in Pittsburgh. WESA began our partnership with StoryCorps to present One Small Step before the coronavirus forced us all indoors and before the 2020 election campaigns hit the dead heat that we've witnessed over the last several months. And we still embrace the same optimism now that we did at the outset, a belief that respectful conversations among strangers who disagree about politics can breed understanding and maybe even common ground. One Small Step is an initiative of StoryCorps, the national nonprofit dedicated to recording and preserving personal stories. The organization has generated the largest collection of human voices ever gathered and archives this collection at the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. WESA is one of 6 public radio stations across the country selected to take part in their One Small Step initiative. Since July, over 400 residents of Western Pennsylvania have signed up to take part in a facilitated One Small Step conversation. Tonight we're going to hear 3 of those conversations and check in with the participants to learn what those conversations have meant to them over time. But first, we welcome Dave Isay, founder and president of StoryCorps, to tell us more about One Small Step and why Pittsburgh is an ideal location for this special project. Dave, thanks for joining us. I guess the first question I have is, how did the StoryCorps One Small Step initiative come about?
Chris, it's great to be here with you. Thanks so much for having me on. And hi to everybody who's here for the event. One Small Step, StoryCorps has been around for 17 years. And as most of the people joining us tonight know, it's a simple idea. You know, we have these booths that travel around the country where you can bring anyone who you want to honor by listening to their story, a parent, a grandparent. You go to this booth, you sit across from your grandmother for 40 minutes and you ask her about her life. And most people think of it as, if I had 40 minutes left to live, what would I say to this person who means so much to me? At the end of the interview, you get a copy. Another one stays with us and goes to the Library of Congress. So your great-great-great-grandkids can get to know your grandmother through her voice and story. We've had about 650,000 people participate. And I should say my grandparents come from Pittsburgh. So there's that connection. StoryCorps worked very well, this kind of signature StoryCorps interview. But, you know, a little bit more than 4 years ago, we started thinking about the crisis of contempt in the country, about how we see our neighbors, people who disagree with us politically, as less than human, and the kind of dangers that can cause. And we know the kind of dangers that dehumanizing the other can cause. And thought about whether we could take the StoryCorps interview methodology and throw it at this problem and make a difference. We ended up completely undoing StoryCorps as we know it. So what happens in a One Small Step interview looks a little bit like a StoryCorps interview you might do with your grandmother, but is very different. Basically, we put strangers together across the political divide, as many people in this gathering know, for a 50-minute session, not to talk about politics, but just to get to know each other as human beings. It's based on a very well-studied theory from psychology called contact theory that says that under very specific circumstances, if you put people who might think of themselves as enemies face to face, the feelings of hate can melt away, and you can see that person in a new light. If you do it wrong, you can make things worse. But with all of our testing with One Small Step, our Hippocratic Oath is to do no harm to people, that when you come to StoryCorps, you leave better off than when you walked in that door. And we've developed a methodology that I think, that I know really makes a difference, and we hope at scale can really make a difference.
And tell us a little bit about the process, because these are unscripted conversations, but they're not entirely unstructured either. So how does the StoryCorps process sort of unfold with the help of the facilitator that you have there facilitating the conversation?
Sure. So unlike a normal StoryCorps interview, where obviously the person you're interviewing, with these One Small Step interviews, again, we developed a new sort of methodology. And the way it starts is that you fill out a form so that we can match you with someone across the divide. There's a little bit of kind of McDonald's special sauce in there. We look for things that have happened in your life that you may have in common. You also fill out about a paragraph about your life, a short bio. And that's shared with the person who you're doing the interview with prior to the interview without your name. So you can't look at, without your last name, your first name, not your last name. So you can't look that person up. And the interview starts with you reading the bio of your interview partner and your interview partner reading your bio back to you. We suggest questions that people talk about. People can talk about anything they want. Most people in One Small Step interviews, as per our advice, talk about their lives, who has been kindest to them, their children, their, how they want to be remembered. Politics may also come up, but it's usually kind of in a slant sort of way. Like, what is it about, my side that, about your side that you think people don't understand? And we have ground rules also. So that, the interviews are healthy and helpful to people. So no yelling, no talking on top of the person who you're interviewing. And of course, listening is always at the core of this. We find that because these interviews all also go to the Library of Congress, that people really bring their best selves into the interview with a stranger. And these almost always go well. And it's really powerful to sit with someone who's a stranger who you might have had preconceived notions about and see them in a slightly different way. There's this quote that, it's really hard to hate up close. And that's kind of one of the undergirding ideas of One Small Step.
So you have been recording these conversations for a few years now at this point, the One Small Step conversations. What are the results that you've seen so far? I don't know if there's anything specifically you could share about a conversation that you think really stands out that you've heard.
We're an organization that is very much kind of a heart organization. It's people often cry in StoryCorps interviews, and it's all about having the chance to have the signature StoryCorps interviews, saying the important things that need to be said, and that happens also in One Small Step interviews. We do a lot of research on what happens in StoryCorps interviews and in One Small Step interviews, and basically what we see is that after a StoryCorps interview, people feel more hopeful. They feel less fearful of the other, more open to listening to people who may be different than them, but it's really and more hopeful about the country. So we see pretty dramatic changes. It also lasts a longer time than one might expect. Again, I actually waited a couple of years to do a test One Small Step interview and did my first one just a couple of weeks ago. And it's a pretty dramatic experience and feeling to be with someone who you otherwise, may never, ever have had the chance to talk to and just see them in a bit of a different light and develop a connection. It's really almost kind of thrilling and very powerful.
This year, 2020, has been a pretty tough one. It's been a pretty crazy year for most people, a global pandemic. In this country, we've had a very contentious presidential election. You said that One Small Step now might be more important this year than ever. Why is that?
Well, I mean, I think that when we started looking at the culture of contempt, and again, this is not about arguing with each other, disagreement. It's not about finding a middle ground. It's about seeing someone as less than human. And I mean, this is the numbers when you look at surveys are growing very, very quickly. This has been around the election. It's been obviously a very, very contentious election. And, you know, there are statistics even in the last couple of weeks that show that we fear and hate our neighbors more than our traditional international adversaries like the Russians, you know, or the Chinese. That the number of people who see someone across the political divide as, you know, less than human, as someone who it would be better if they weren't alive or were not in this country anymore, is growing. And, you know, that's incredibly dangerous. We know what dehumanization can do. You know, in Nazi Germany, the Nazis used to refer to Jews and others as Untermenschen, as less than human, and there's slavery and there's Rwanda. Now, I'm not saying that's what's happening in this country, but it's a dangerous and slippery slope. And, you know, this is just one small step. That's why it's called One Small Step. But, you know, given the situation in the country, you know, we feel like it's important to take a very hard swing at this. And we're honored to work with you guys and to work with folks all across Pittsburgh to begin to scale this and see if we can convince the country that it's our patriotic duty to see the humanity in people with whom we might disagree.
And Dave, we are very excited and happy to be working with StoryCorps on the One Small Step initiative and bringing it to WESA's listeners. I apologize for some of the video glitchiness we had here during this conversation, but Dave Isay is the founder of StoryCorps. Thanks so much for talking to us about One Small Step.
Yes, I appreciate it. Take care. Be well.
You too.
Hi, my name is Maria Rose, and I'm leading the One Small Step initiative here in Pittsburgh. So far, that's involved interviewing and matching over 400 participants, facilitating their conversations, and editing their pieces. In the first piece we'll hear now, we're going to hear from Tanya Davis and Aaron Weedman. They both grew up in Pittsburgh, but had very different experiences, Aaron as a white man and Tanya as a Black woman. In their conversation here, they talk about what they can do to bridge racial divides.
So Aaron says, I grew up in relatively affluent, largely white and Jewish neighborhood in Pittsburgh, PA. I believe firmly that hard work every day is all you need, and I try not to use the word luck. I also try to be accepting of all people, regardless of race, religion, sexuality, or nationality. Everyone deserves an equal chance to succeed in life. So Aaron, do you believe you've been lucky or luck has helped you?
I do, and I've thought very carefully about that sentence, and I phrased it as I try not to use the word luck, not that I don't believe in luck. If you wake up in the morning and you can believe that you have complete control over whatever it is you want to happen will happen. And I think if you believe that, even if it's not entirely true, you're more likely to do everything you can to make it happen. Tanya, you wrote, I'm a 53-year-old Black woman. I have 3 children, married. I used to believe in people as a whole. I used to love the ideal of America, the apple pie and hot dogs, and I raised my children that way. You pull yourself up by your bootstraps and work your way through. So it sounds like maybe there was a series of events or just current happenings that kind of made you lose faith in that idea that each of us can work to what we have. And what do you want to say a little more about what made that change in your mind?
Look at today. Just take a look, Aaron. We're just not where the American dream. That's the joke for people that look like me. You can work hard and do your best, but you know, there's a lot of ceilings that put a hold on your success. I pray that you don't think that I'm being negative at all.
All good.
But you know that your white skin and you being a male, you have 90% of what America would deem useful, wanted. When you walk into a room, there's no one looking at you as if you may rob them or rape them, or abuse them in any way. My son is 6'4". He's about 350. He's probably a gentlest giant you'll ever meet, but the way people look at him, it hurts me to my core. What I'm saying is, it's hard to pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you don't have any boots. Do you understand?
Then there's no straps.
There's no straps to pull. So you're walking through this thing with nothing on. Where Aaron, you have boots, a fur coat, and another pair of shoes in the closet. And I'm not blaming you for anything. I'm just giving you my, view of.
I think that's really good point. And so I guess, what do we do about that? Like, I like to think that I try my best to overcome those prejudices the best I can, but I'm curious to your thoughts. Like, how do we individually overcome the kinds of prejudices that you're describing that are really real and affect people?
Aaron, do you have any Black friends like that come to your home and know your family, things like that? Do you have any?
Not presently, although I do have one close friend at work who's Indian, but not any Black friends currently.
No. And see, that's the problem there, because you don't know the way Black people move in this world. You may think you don't have any racism in your body, but I'm sure you've looked at somebody Black and was like, he's this, he's that, she's this, she's that. So maybe get to know somebody, Aaron, on a personal level.
Tanya, let me just say, I think if anything, these kinds of conversations are really good in terms of making me stop and think about ways to do better. Is there anything you learned about me today that surprised you?
That you be willing to make a Black friend. I hope you stick to that, Aaron. I hope you really put forth the effort to make friends with a Black person. I really, really, really hope you do.
I will.
I hope so. Because your influence could influence a whole lot of others. The ability to tell someone who looks like you about someone who looks like me would be great. It'd be awesome.
Okay. I'll have to ask for your address so I can write you a letter and tell you how that's going in a
That's awesome.
month or something.
That is awesome. Email me. How about that?
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, let me know how it's going. I'd appreciate it.
So, we just heard your piece, Aaron and Tanya, and I'm glad to have you here with me to talk about it. And to start, I just wanted to ask what it's like to hear that piece. Aaron, if you want to go first.
Oh, it was, I enjoyed listening to it. Although I must say, Tanya, when they played it and I knew I was going to say a thing about how I had an Indian friend, I was actually kind of embarrassed because I think it shows that I kind of at first missed the question a little bit. I didn't quite get what you were saying, but so be it. But no, it was good to hear it. I mean, it's been interesting reflecting on it over the last month or so since we talked, but I really enjoyed the conversation. So it was fun to hear a little bit of it on the radio.
I enjoyed it, and I truly hope that our conversation would influence someone, anybody that looks like you and I, Aaron, a Jewish gentleman or woman, and an African-American woman or man, so that they can honestly, because our daily walk, and we talk to our friends and our colleagues and people we pray with, we have a lot of influence, more than we believe. And if they see, oh, Aaron's got that dude who's so nice as a Black guy, and he can really vouch for him for real, and there's no weird stuff, and my wife leaves her purse in a room with him, and he's not looking at, or what I deem looking at it to rob it. Like, I think we truly can. We have an influence more than what we believe. And I think if we tell people, and they tell people and tell people, it's a ripple effect. I wanted Aaron to understand me, and I wanted him to see me not as a Black woman, as a human being who walks through life, gets up, gets a shower, gets my clothes on, go to work, and I'm doing the same thing he's doing. We just have a different sexuality and different color. That's all. We're all the same. We all want the same things in life. We want a home. We want to educate ourselves, our children, be happy, make good money, travel. That's what we all want. Nobody wants to wake up in the morning and hurt somebody or be robbed or be ridiculed, because that's the worst.
The conversation, it made me reflect on the fact that in my normal course of life, like I don't even encounter that many Black people, and it's unfortunate. I think it speaks to the segregation that still exists just by the way people and the locations which people choose to live.
I have high hopes that Aaron will truly, and I'm not putting this on Aaron's shoulders because he's not the end all beat all whites or Jews or anything like that. But like I said, his influence is stronger than what he thinks, I believe, because in his where he congregates for religious purposes or his job or just his friends, he can say, I met this lady on StoryCorps, real nice woman. Like there was no difference in us. We were literally striving for the same exact things, maybe different ways, different paths, but truly striving for the same things. And that's what I got out of it. I'm hoping that I could have said something to him to influence him in a way in which he wouldn't feel uncomfortable with the next Black person he sees. And Aaron, I'd like to say this, and please don't get upset. In an atmosphere that doesn't make the Black person subservient, in an atmosphere that you make a Black friend on your level, religiously, money wise, same area in which you live.
It's interesting to hear, Tanya, what you just were saying about like how, even just talking to people about someone I met on StoryCorps, because that's actually been one of the really fun things about, when a few close family members and friends heard our interview, I got to tell them a little bit about you and what you had to say and how much I respected you. And in fact, like, I don't think we talked about this in the original interview, but I work in healthcare as well. And so I was telling some of my family how, you run a home health agency, and there's actually, we didn't even talk about it, but there's a lot of common ground there. And again, how much we sort of saw eye to eye on issues like, we talked about the $600 a week handouts and how it can disincentivize people from working. And I think with all that in mind, like, having this conversation in this year, I think it makes me think even more seriously about like the choice we have coming up in the election. And, I think, I think from time to time, like to be frank, like there's a tendency to sort of roll your eyes at Trump and the things he says, and kind of like he's ridiculous, but whatever. But actually, I think if in the light of some of the things we talk about and issues of race, like, it's not something to be just sort of sloughed off as ridiculous. Like a lot of the sort of divisive things he says actually have real big consequences. And so, it's a little scary to think what might happen next week and how long it might take to decide. But it certainly is. It emphasizes the importance of next week's election.
I just want this guy out, but if he's in, what are you gonna do? I'm an essential worker, so I'm necessary. I've got to work. My only, and I'm not gonna say fear, is my only apprehension is if Biden gets in. I've heard so many people say Fifi's joining us. So many people say that there's going to be a race war or civil war or civil unrest.
The kinds of changes that Tanya, you're sort of talking about aspirationally, like what we hope might be better relations between people of different races. I think they can be influenced both from the top, like our leaders, and from the bottom, like individual people like us. And so I guess I would say that, obviously I have my fingers and toes crossed for a certain outcome of the election, but regardless, like even if Biden wins, that doesn't mean like that racism goes away,
right?
That we, and so I think the message for our future selves is the things we talk about and the goals to make connections across races as much as we can are important, regardless of who the president is.
We don't have to agree, but we can have a conversation where you'll understand me and I'll understand you, and we get to know each other without the divisive and the rude. And I've seen some things I never ever thought I'd see in my lifetime. In America, no. But I think if we sit down and have conversations with each other, about 10 years ago, I was trying to set up a panel of people my age from all over the city so we could sit down and talk. This is before Obama. And or during when he first got in, and it was like everybody's like, "No, we're happy. No, the races get along. No, no, it's fine." And I'm like, "Guys, it's not." But look where we're at.
Like, where in my life is the place where I would naturally encounter a Black person? Because that's the first step to making a Black friend. I've seen a few Black folks in our new neighborhood. It's over near Swissvale. So it's definitely more mixed than Squirrel Hill, where we used to live. But it's still like that would be my first one small step, is as actually meeting a few Black people and just striking up some conversations like, hey, we just moved to the neighborhood. So you can bet I have my eyes peeled for that opportunity.
And Aaron, I make the best macaroni and cheese in the world.
Yeah?
I'm telling you. So when you have these friends, these Black people that you meet, tell them a friend of mine makes the best macaroni and cheese. Come on over to my house. I'll have macaroni and cheese, and you pick up something and tell them to bring the vegetable. Guaranteed, they'll be your friend.
Wait a second. Tanya, you're inviting us all to your house. Is that what I'm hearing?
Aaron, I make the best macaroni and cheese. I'm telling you. Whenever you want, you get my email from Maria whenever you want. You're more than welcome here with my husband, my kids, any your friends, your family. Bring them over.
Okay.
Well, thank you both so much for reflecting. It's so much fun to talk to you both, and I'm really glad we got a chance to do this.
Me too.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Maria. I appreciate both of you. Please keep me in touch. Honestly, guys, email me whenever you feel like it. When you get bored, when you get lonely, email me and just say hi.
Okay.
I'm a talker. I'll talk to you.
All right.
Okay?
Thanks, Tanya.
Thanks, guys.
Aaron.
Hey, guys, have a nice rest of the year.
In the second piece, we're going to hear from Amber Nider and Dan Legger. In their conversation, they talk about the Tree of Life shooting that happened in Squirrel Hill 2 years ago and how they responded as Pittsburghers and as people with different views on gun rights.
I am a native Pittsburgher. I grew up in Homewood, Brushton, an observant Jew, married father of 2 grown sons. I am a certified palliative care chaplain. I'm a surviving shooting victim of the October 27th Tree of Life building massacre. First of all, I'm so sorry that happened to you. How did you get past that?
There are certain things in life that you don't get past. This is one of them. You know, I wake up every morning and I'm grateful to be alive, and I put one foot in front of the other, and I miss my friends, but I move forward. Yeah.
I mean, that's traumatic.
I appreciate the fact that you're feeling it along with me. I really do feel that you're feeling it along with me, but I'm okay. I miss my friends who are no longer alive. And, you know, my body doesn't work the same way it was before I was shot. But I really do think that it's how we respond to those things that makes us who we are, and how we can get along after big things happen to us really is a test of who we can be. You okay?
I'm just processing it. I think it's something that, while not every Pittsburgher was there, we all were.
Well, I hope you never have to go through anything like it, and nobody that you know. I feel pretty strongly that the way we deal with firearms in this country is really something that's a problem. I don't disagree that people feel that they need to defend themselves, but I guess I don't understand why people feel that they need to possess a weapon that was really created for the military. I know that there are a lot of people who disagree with me, but I've just seen so many people hurt by firearms, not just myself and my friends who were killed. Through my career as a nurse, I worked with many, many kids who were injured in firearms accidents.
I do think there's a big problem in this country with access to guns for people that probably shouldn't have access to them. And I'm saying this as someone I carry a gun every day. I carry a small capacity semi-automatic handgun, and I have for years. I have never had to use it.
I'm so glad you haven't had to use it.
Yeah, me too.
But at the same time, it makes me wonder why you feel that the world is such an unsafe place that you need that backup.
Well, I've been robbed before. My home has been broken into. I've been followed in my car. So it's been proven to me that sometimes calling the police is not fast enough. I've never been seriously injured, but I've been put in a place where there is that fear that if I am alone and not able to defend myself, then what am I left to? I definitely think we agree, and legislation needs to put laws in place to make it safer. If it's a little slower of a process, maybe those immediate feelings that someone that's thinking of committing a crime like that, maybe they have a day to cool off. Maybe they have an opportunity to have a conversation like we've had, or, express what they're thinking about doing. Do you ever feel troubled by people from your same side of the aisle?
One of the things that I did as I was emerging from from the ICU and becoming awake after a while was express my need to forgive the shooter. And this is something that some people really completely disagreed with in my community. I think the forgiveness is really important. I think that it does not mean that you absolve someone from their actions, but it was interpreted that that sense of need on my part to forgive this individual for what he did to me also meant that I was forgiving him for killing 11 people, and that's not the case. My attitude about that is not to try to convince people that I'm right and you're wrong, because that doesn't work. We have way too much of that these days. And that's unfortunately what led somebody to come into my synagogue and do what he did. I just really wish that he had come in frustration and said, I want to talk to you rather than I want to shoot you.
I think these types of back and forth conversations where people are listening to understand what the person is saying and, acknowledging their viewpoint in a respectful way. Just it's okay to disagree. What's not okay is the failure to communicate. So I'm really glad we had this chance to do this today.
That really means a lot to me, and I'm delighted to have met you and spoken with you. I wish you well in the world and as we go forward.
All right. Thank you, Dan and Amber, for joining us today for this conversation. And I guess I just wanted to start by asking what it was like to hear yourselves in that produced piece. Amber, if you want to go first.
It was strange to hear myself recorded. I don't do that very often. I really was nice to hear the conversation again and hear how it came together. I'm glad with the way it turned out.
It's always strange to hear a conversation that you feel is a real conversation, and there were some intimate moments there, and so to have that ability to sort of go back into that private space was somewhat special. I appreciated it.
I want to do this project because I think now more than ever it's super important for people who are able to sit down and have civil conversations to have them, and people who are capable of being respectful to engage in difference of opinion. We don't see that a lot, and it's just more often you see people discover that they don't agree, and then the conversation ends or it dissolves into something that's not so respectful. So I really wanted to share and be a part of perpetuating a more healthy conversation style.
Well, I really try to look for opportunities to talk to people who are different than me, both so that I can understand them and hopefully so that they can understand that people who are different from them are people, and we're all in this together and okay.
I read Dan's bio. It was pretty clear what we were going to end up talking about. And I didn't, I just wasn't prepared for how I felt emotionally after reading it. I don't know. It hit me in a way that I wasn't ready for. I was really apprehensive to speak to someone who had been through a tragedy like that, and to talk about the thing that had injured them. Um, Especially knowing that, I feel in a positive way about the Second Amendment. And I think it was fair to Dan as a victim to put that idea out into space, knowing that the bad thing that happened to him was, possible because of some of the rights and laws that are out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to shift the conversation in a healthy way, though.
This is emotional stuff, and because it's stuff that has really affected us. But I think one of the big things that's different about this conversation that was important to me was that I tend to think of people who are defenders of the Second Amendment and gun owners primarily as people who are on the offense rather than the defense. And in talking with Amber and hearing her and really trying to listen to her, it was clear to me that we are both victims, each of us, and hearing that, Amber, you feel this need to uh, be able to have a certain degree of power over situations in which you have found yourself powerless before. Really brings it home to me in a way that was different from many conversations I've had with other people. Because, usually I'm talking to guys who are bigger than me in my face about stuff about this. And uh, you are bigger than those people in other ways, like inside, spiritually. And that really speaks to me. And it makes me sad to think that the resources we have out there for people who are in vulnerable situations isn't as good as it needs to be, so that people like you don't have to feel like they've got to carry a gun to be able to be prepared in a situation where that victimization might come up. Yeah, this is a really difficult election season, and I, I guess in trying to figure out how this conversation would be viewed after the election, whenever it's going to be decided, um, is, just reminds me that we need to move in the direction of not arguing with each other.
What we need to remember is that we're in this together. There's going to be a winner and there's going to be a loser. Hopefully everything transfers peacefully if that's the case, or maybe we learn from the last 4 years and do things a little differently if the alternative occurs. But I think it's good to remember that we're all people at the end of the day, and we all have to get through life, and maybe we need to be a little more gracious and understanding after the election.
Part of us is right about stuff and part of us is not, because we're only living in our skin, in our experience, and we've got to allow ourselves to some degree to at least feel what it's like to be in somebody else's situation, and not just always have the next sentence ready to throw back at somebody, but to really wait a second and integrate what you hear before you start just reacting.
I would say to continue the narrative, to engage in conversation and, listen to what people are saying, to understand what they're saying, not to get your point across. You don't always have to respond immediately. You can digest the topic and, come up with a dignified and thought out response versus an emotional response. I think it's really difficult, especially in these times with all the division that we see going on, to engage in conversations that are moving things forward and helping other people to feel understood. And I really think that should be our goal, moving forward.
Yeah, thank you for that, Amber. I really do appreciate it. And I guess in terms of next steps, Yeah, if we can learn from each other in the way that I feel that I've learned from Amber, and I hope that she has learned from me as well, then these kinds of conversations can, grow into something else. It starts out as something that has this idea and this intention, but if everything just stays where it was intended to go, then it's going to be stuck. It needs to grow and move in other directions, and hopefully that's where these things can go. So next steps are always clear to some degree and very unclear in other degrees. And part of the adventure is figuring out what becomes clearer as we engage in the conversation.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for coming back to reflect and to finding time to speak with each other again. And thank you for the conversation. If there's anything else you'd like to say to each other, just to end, we can do that. And other than that, thank you both.
Well,
Thanks
Amber,
for coming back.
oh, thank you for coming
Yeah.
back. It was a pleasure to meet you, and a double pleasure to be able to talk again. And I hope that other people who are part of this one step, one small step project can feel that as well, and really feel like they've gained something from this in a way that's added to their life in the same way that you have added to mine, Amber. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both.
Thank you, Maria.
In this third conversation, we're going to hear from Susan Uffelman and Michelle Chermello. They're both quite involved in local politics. Michelle has had several positions in local government, and Susan lately has been working to organize getting kids back into the schools. In their conversation, they talk about what it means to be American and how to see people with different political views as people.
My parents were always very patriotic, always the family on the street that had the American flag out front. They say that a lot of times people are more liberal when they're younger and they tend to get more conservative. But I will say, I think I've always been conservative. I believe in lower taxes, less government involvement, the Constitution. I believe in the Second Amendment.
So this is where we don't have a lot in common. I think government is not a threat to our liberty, but it protects it. That government should solve problems, and it's a necessary agent for equality. I am not for low taxes. I think we all need to pay our fair share. And if you have more, lucky you, you need to give more for the greater good.
So how are you feeling about the election?
Quite honestly, I'm nervous. When I drive around my neighborhood, I do see Trump flags flying. And so I am nervous that after 4 years of his lack of leadership, people are still supporting him and believe that he can turn things around.
Well, you would feel right at home in my neighborhood. Because I can't walk 50 feet without seeing a blue sign.
Really? Okay.
But I am nervous about it as well. You know, I voted Republican in 2016. I will vote Republican again this year. For me, it's more of a vote against the Democrat. But I think we've gotten to a place where we are so polarized.
It did seem to turn so personal, right? I mean, in the past, you could have a civil conversation with someone about a policy, and that was that. It's become that if you are a supporter of Trump, you are something. If you are a supporter of Biden, you are fill in the blank.
Quite honestly, the unfortunate part of this is that we have two old white men that we have to choose from. Those are our two choices.
Yes,
and one of my big fears is I do fear that regardless of what happened, we could be looking at some civil unrest or, you know, some type of serious disruption in our country. I hope and pray that that does not happen.
I would agree. That is my fear as well, that something will happen, regardless of who wins. There will be unrest. But I'm also afraid of losing rights that people fought so hard for. I'm afraid of what's happened to our country will get worse. The divide will get even larger. And I wonder sometimes, I really do fear that have we gone to the point of no return, and can we start to build bridges again?
So how can we come together after a divisive election this year?
That's tough. I think maybe we need to turn the news off, listen to that less, and listen to each other more, because hearing each other and talking to one another is certainly better than repeating and regurgitating what the talking heads on any TV station wants us to hear. And I think we need to get back to knowing our neighbors. And even if we have a difference of opinion, there's certainly something that we agree upon. And we need to start there and build.
I feel like it's going to be important to accept the results of the election, regardless of what side you're on. I didn't vote for Obama, and while I didn't approve of everything he did, he was still my president. So I would hope that regardless of what side you're on, that we can all come together as Americans and accept the president as the president.
So we have Michelle and Susan here to talk about their piece and reflect on it a little bit. And just to start, what does it feel like to hear a little bit of that conversation? Susan, if you want to go first.
It feels good. It was a little uncomfortable, I think, to talk about some of this stuff openly, because especially right now, everything being so divisive, it's not something I generally talk about, especially with people I don't know well. So it was a little hard to put myself out there, but I also feel like it's an important conversation. And I think it's important because I think sometimes we realize we're more alike than we are different.
I would agree. I think at the heart of everything, I think Susan and I are probably quite similar in so many ways. We just seem to have different views on this political spectrum, and my hope in doing this was to talk to someone who didn't think the same way as me, and hopefully get a view of someone who has a different opinion of mine, which I successfully did. You know, I'm still a strong supporter of the Democratic Party, as she probably is of the Republicans, but it's good to hear someone else's point of view.
I mean, the reason that I wanted to do this whole process was, again, to have a conversation with somebody who's opposite of me, because it's just not something that it's comfortable to talk about. And I think the only way we can really learn or be open to others' points of view is by engaging with them and understanding why they feel the way they do. And it's not necessarily about trying to change anyone's mind, because I think given where we are today, that's not going to happen. We aren't going to change anyone's mind, which is okay. Mm-hmm. But it's about understanding where people are coming from and what led them to maybe believe the way they do.
Yeah. Humanity is the basic tenet of the Democratic Party. You know, I feel like that's what we stand for. And I think we've seen over those past 4 years this frustration over injustice and this manifestation of fatigue for relitigating things that we thought were decided. I mean, I think what I would say to the Democrats is, you know, they're fed up, and I understand that, and we see some acting out, and they're acting out with a vengeance, you know, and I guess I would tell them at this point to try and temper their anger with some thoughtfulness and stop looking at things as red and blue, and look at the issues as through the lens of what's the best for the American people. And we could probably get a lot more done if we didn't care so much about who was getting the credit. So I think there's justifiable anger and frustration, but we need to, as I said, temper that with some thoughtfulness and compassion, because again, that's who we are.
It's important for both sides to just remember that you can't judge people, and you can't make assumptions about what you think they are as a person based on a candidate. Just because we're voting for a particular person doesn't necessarily mean that we agree with everything on that platform. And sometimes we just have to make what we think is the best choice for who we're going to vote for. And I think, especially where we are right now, the extremes are on both sides are what's causing so much of the problem. And really, the vast majority of us are in the middle. I think we are much more purple than we are red and blue.
I listen to music a lot, and that gives me a lot of inspiration. And there's this one song just keeps popping back into my head. It's by Jason Isbell, who's an amazing musician, and it's called "Hope the High Road." And there's a line in it that says, "I know you're tired and you're not sleeping well, uninspired and likely mad as hell. But wherever you are, I hope the high road brings you home again to a world you want to live in." And that's where I am. Like, I want to be back to the world I want to live in. And I see that Joe Biden leading that way for me. So, like, let's stop finger pointing. Let's stop all of this divisiveness, and let's all get on the high road and work together and make this world what we want it to be.
Wow, I love that quote. That was awesome.
He's an amazing musician.
I'll have to look that up. I would like to tell myself to remain calm. And I'm actually working at the polls this year. I'm going to be a poll worker. And I'm going to come home that night after working at the polls, and I'm going to turn my phone off, and I'm not going to watch the news, and I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm not even going to look at anything until the next day. And I'm trying to accept the fact, too, that we may not have a decision that night. This may be the first time in history that we don't know. We aren't going to know going to bed what the decision is. So I'm going to try and remain calm and not stress out about it, and know that really in my day-to-day life, regardless of what happens, I'm going to wake up the next day and I'm going to go to work, and regardless of what happens, things aren't going to change that much for me immediately.
I think my next step, what this whole thing has given me is I want to maybe be more vocal about. It's really reaffirmed in me that I believe so strongly in what I was taught was the Democratic Party, and I've kind of stepped back and stood back and not engaged because I didn't want the conflict. And I feel like I need to stand up, regardless of whether you're going to agree with me or not. This has shown me how important it is to be the voice, to stand up for what you believe in and not back down. So my next step would be just to be more vocal and more open about what I think is right for our local, state, county, national level, and maybe support more Democratic candidates in the future.
I think depending on what the outcome is, just being more open to talking to some of my friends who I know are on the opposite side of this, being more open to hearing their points of view. And honestly, there have been people that I've been avoiding seeing in person because of this, because I haven't wanted to have the conversation or have it come up. And I'd like to be able to get back to seeing those people in person and knowing that we can still move forward and be friends.
Well, thank you so much for your conversation then and now. And unless there's anything else you'd like to add or say to each other, I really appreciate you coming back to do some reflecting.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Wow. Those were some powerful stories and powerful conversations. And it's really refreshing to hear how pushing past issues and getting to humanity can bring us closer together, even when we disagree. And while these conversations took on a decidedly more virtual quality than was initially intended, we're so grateful to tonight's conversation partners and all of our One Small Step participants for bringing openness and authenticity to our space. And thank you to our expert facilitator, Maria Rose, for creating that space and welcoming participants to share. We couldn't have completed this effort without the care and guidance of Jacqueline Van Meter from StoryCorps, who has been with us every step of the way, and of course to Dave Isay for building this initiative and sharing it with us. And a final thanks to all of those who attended this special event tonight. If you're inspired by what you've seen and heard, we invite you to visit wesa.fm/onesmallstep, where you can listen to more One Small Step conversations and download a conversation guide to help you engage in One Small Step style conversations with people in your own life. StoryCorps One Small Step is made possible in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people. These conversations were recorded and edited for air on 90.5 WESA by me, Christopher Ayers, and tonight's event was produced by Nick Wright. Our CEO and president is Terry O'Reilly. 90.5 WESA is Pittsburgh's NPR news station. We're a nonprofit, community-funded radio station and newsroom. Initiatives like One Small Step and the conversations that you heard tonight are made possible by you. Our members make up most of our revenue stream every year, the largest revenue stream, in fact, keeping the news that you need and the stories that expose you to different perspectives on the air. So join us, become a sustaining member at wesa.fm. You can't miss the big red donate button. Thank you again for joining us this evening. For 90.5 WESA, I'm Christopher Ayers. Have a good night.